And welcome back to the Touchline Talk Show. We got what are arguably the two most important games the U.S. men's national team is going to play before the World Cup. Now, it appears, based on what I've seen, people saying that Greg Berhalter has confirmed that the two friendlies in between now and the World Cup, those last two games are also in Europe, are also against World Cup opponents. So this may change depending on how this all plays out and who those opponents end up being. There's a decent chance neither of them is as good as Uruguay. So this is Greg Berhalter treated this the way it should have been. He said we're going to go for it and put our best guys out there for these two games against these two opponents, and let's see what happens, see what we can learn. We're going to start on the positive side, and then we're going to go to the negative side here. One of the biggest things I took away from these two games is that Berhalter has found multiple approaches that can work with this team. The biggest challenge you have as a U.S. or Mexico head coach in CONCACAF, and now a Canadian one as well, is that the transition between doing it against Panama or Jamaica or El Salvador or whoever else, these smaller countries in the region, and doing it at a World Cup, whatever it may be. And for Berhalter is passing out of the back and playing out of the back. Because it's one thing to do it against a team that is happy to give you the ball, that is playing defensive and more than comfortable and happy to whack your players around. That is not what you're getting when you're playing England, Wales, and Iran. Or insert team here if you get to the knockout round. So the question becomes, okay, these sort of mid-tier World Cup teams, your Moroccos, your Uruguays, who are sort of in that number 2 spot in a group just like the U.S., in theory. Maybe a 3, but in that same ballpark. Can you do it against them? And Berhalter's acknowledged it's a different world when you're talking about England. But if the U.S. can't play out of the back against and do the things the U.S. wants to against these two teams, that raises some real red flags heading into Qatar. So we got two big takeaways here. Basically one from each game. The U.S. is capable of controlling a game without dominating the ball. That is what worked so well against Morocco. And a large part of that was the Brendan Aronson dropping into the midfield 3 experiment. And in this window, Berhalter has sort of shifted it more to a double pivot. So Yunus Musa is coming to help Tyler Adams, which gives somebody like Brendan Aronson sort of that license to play as a number 10. So it worked out really well in that sense. But the combination of the pressing that was really good against Morocco for most of the game, and that for the goal Brendan Aronson scored, is exactly the kind of run he makes. I do not believe he is going to be a prolific goal scorer in the Premier League. There is nothing to suggest in his career he is going to be. But what can he do? He can go find open space. And he will take space away from you. That's the two things he is excellent at, time and space. And so that him darting, 25 yards or whatever it was to get into the middle of the box and open up that lane for Pulisic to feed him the ball is exactly who he is. And that's how he's going to score his goals. It's very, very similar to the one he scored against Canada. Of course, he didn't force the turnover here, but it's the same idea. So balancing him with Musa on the other side, who is a terrific ball carrier and was really, really good in these two games, gives you sort of two different options in that midfield. And I was a little skeptical that could work, but it certainly did. Then we get to Uruguay, and the takeaway there for me was this team can play out of the back at times. It's got to pick your spots. Can't do it always. You're going to have to rely on the pressing, on the quick turnovers, the direct play, like the ball Walker Zimmerman played to Pulisic that ended in Ericsson's goal. That has to be part of the equation here. But after 10 minutes, it looked like there was no way in the world this team was going to be comfortable playing out of the back. It was a disaster. And then all of a sudden, they figured it out. Won the possession battle, created some chances. Now, Uruguay probably should have won. Cavani missed a sitter at the end. Sean Johnson made a huge save. We'll get to U.S. chances a little bit later here. But there were stretches where the U.S. was able to hold on to the ball, to build things up, and when the game flipped in Uruguay's favor when they brought the big-time subs on, that was not an inability to hold on to the ball. That was Uruguay just having those 20 minutes where they're the dominant team and you can't get the ball back. That has nothing to do with your ability to play out of the back. That has to do with your ability to stop the other team from dominating the ball. So that was a real positive because that's always been the question with Berhalter and the thing I've always been a little bit skeptical of. It's great. It sounds great. It's great in practice against CONCACAF teams that want to give you the ball. Can you do it against teams that are comfortable without the ball, that can absolutely destroy you if you make a mistake? Are you capable of holding on to the ball against those teams? And it seems like it can be part of the formula that the U.S. is going to use. Maybe not against England, but certainly against those. I mean, Wales are going to be more than comfortable to give you the ball. Can the U.S. do that to actually pin Wales in and not let Gareth Bale run free on the wing in transition and counterattacks and those kind of things? So those were the two big things. And then the third part of this for me is the defensive clarity. Aaron Long is, barring something unforeseen, Aaron Long is going to be the guy with Walker Zimmerman. He got both starts, played fairly well, no major concerns. And to me, it spoke volumes that he got both starts. The other center backs got in there a little bit, but Long has always been one of Berhalter's favorites. He was the guy until he got hurt, tore his Achilles, and then Miles Robinson came in, took his spot, and Miles Robinson tore his Achilles, and so Aaron Long is back to take his spot back. I fully expect those to be the starting center backs in that first game. Maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit on that, but I would be stunned if something happens, and assuming those two guys stay healthy and are 100% good to go for the World Cup. The other part of this, Anthony Robinson is as valuable as anyone on this team, including Christian Pulisic. Maybe not more valuable, but certainly as valuable. Joe Scally got the start at left back because Anthony Robinson was dealing with a non-COVID illness. And to me, this was the perfect simulation for the way Joe Scally might get on the field in Qatar. Because Anthony Robinson is going to play all three group stage games unless there's a reason for him not to. If there's something on the line and he is healthy, he's going to start all three. Which means it might be a last-second thing if Scally's going to get on the field. So he got thrown in there, and it was rough. He was getting caught out of position, didn't give you much going forward. And look, he's 19. I'm a big Scally guy. Maybe this wouldn't have happened if he would have gotten more reps previously. The problem is you have no backup left back. There is nobody who has solidified themselves as that second guy. Well, you look at the right side of the field, you got Dest, Cannon, Shaq Moore can't even get into these teams, and he's been good when he got to play, and DeAndre Yedlin. You got four guys I feel comfortable with. You got one on the left. And so we saw what happens when Anthony Robinson is not there. And the other thing I wanted to... Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. So questions. We'll sort of jump in and start continuing this thought. The other interesting experiment that happened here was the switch from 4 in the back to 3 in the back against Morocco without changing the players on the field. So you had Robinson playing as a left wing back, Cannon coming in as the right center back, and basically nobody playing right wing back. Because Brendan Aronson was the midfielder on that side of the field. Morocco just pinged the ball consistently into that space that nobody was covering. The exact areas that if Reggie Cannon was playing in the back four, he would have been in. I am a firm believer in the back three. I will fight for it until the day I die. I believe it has immense value if executed correctly and with the right personnel. The problem was the personnel wasn't right because nobody had any idea who was supposed to be covering that space. They went back to the four. All of a sudden, Reggie Cannon can get up the field, help set up Tim Weah's goal, if things look much better. This team is built to play with a back three because Dest and Robinson are at their best going forward. The problem is you don't have Dest in this camp. And so that's where I would love to hear the thought process behind trying that. Was it just let's see what happens? Or is that something that the U.S. is going to try and do in the World Cup? Because I certainly hope Dest is healthy and they're trying it with him in this last window coming up. If they're going to try and make in-game switches like that. Because if you don't have the person that you can't do that with four defenders. You need five. Or somebody capable of dropping. Now, Tyler Adams could play right wing back. He has for Leipzig. The problem is when you play him in center of midfield as that number 6, to ask him to cover that space is asking him to go to the very farthest part of the field. Right? Whereas if it's a back four, that space is a little bit easier to get to. You're asking him to get up into the midfield, essentially. So it was just a mess. Fine it with the idea, seeing what it looks like. My question is, what does that mean for defensive setup come World Cup? Is that something that's going to be tried again? If so, is the personnel going to be better equipped to do it? Or is that just something we're never going to see again and it's going to be 4 all the way through? That was something that I was very curious about, that I was very captivated watching, because it was just so obvious that there was not a clearly understood plan as to how to make that change and how to fill those gaps. Of course, the other big question is what happens with the number 9 position, and can somebody on this team get an end product going consistently? This was a massive, massive set of 2 games for Jesus Ferreira. And the lack of impact he had in game 1, his wasting of 2 good chances in game 2, in my mind, make him the next guy in this cycle of they're in great form, we give them a run, they have a couple of good games, score some goals, and you feel like, okay, this guy's, maybe he's the one. And then they fall off, and most of them aren't even on this roster that's in camp right now. See Josh Sargent and Ricardo Pepi. To me, Ferrer is at that point. He's been phenomenal for FC Dallas. He's a joint leading goal scorer in MLS. With, by the way, Jeremy Abobasi, another U.S. international who doesn't seem particularly close to getting into this team. But that's a discussion for another day. So in my mind, you're more or less back to square one. Had Ferreira really delivered, scored those couple goals against Uruguay, I think he might have locked that spot down. At least gotten the first crack at it. Gotten those 2 more starts in the last 2 games, the last 2 warm-ups, and would be the number 9 for that first game in the World Cup. Now it's going to come down to what happens at the beginning of next season, club-wise. Because I can go point to 5 different guys that may end up starting as the number 9 against Wales. It could be Ferreira. It could be Pepi. It could be Tim Weah. If you want to get your best 11 players on the field, Tim Weah is the answer. It could be Jordan Pefok. he is still an established European goal scorer. Or it could be Haji Wright, who scored a penalty drawn by Christian Pulisic and didn't do much else. But in fairness to him, he got thrown on as a substitute in the second half both games and really didn't get a chance to get comfortable and get a lot of reps. Also, like for in blistering form for his club. So if he continues that, there's every justification for letting him start those two games. And if he plays well, giving him the first shot because he's so new to this equation. In some ways, he's the logical next guy up. I have no clue who it's going to be, and I don't think Greg Berhalter does either. The more I watch these guys struggle to take advantage of the opportunity, the more I'm leaning toward the best solution to this problem is to start Tim Weah centrally, with Reyna and Pulisic on either side of him, and then three of your four excellent midfielders being McKinney, Musa, Adams, and Aronson as those three. And if I've got to bring a guy off the bench, I want to bring on Aronson. I'm the biggest Brendan Aronson advocate you will find. To me, he's the guy that's going to be most impactful and has the ability to change a game off the bench. Can do it without scoring a goal or having a moment of brilliance. He can do it just because of his work rate and his understanding of how to make teams uncomfortable and how to take away space. That's if I got to pick, if you're asking me to build a lineup for a World Cup that starts tomorrow, that's what I'm doing up top. Tim Weah has been excellent. He's made himself a starter. Whether he ends up or not is a different conversation, but from a performance standpoint, he has absolutely been one of the best 11 players. I want as many of those guys on the field as possible, especially when so much else has gone poorly at that position. So, I mean, there are other options, and there's plenty of time. This is going to go down to the wire. It's going to depend on how these players are performing. I mean, it's not out of the question Josh Sargent somehow gets his name back in the hat, although I doubt it. It's going to come down to who is putting the ball in the back of the net for their club, and can they do it for the national team as well? Because you very well may see different guys up top game 2, game 3 of the group stage if game 1 doesn't go well. And like I said, this is where I'll end it. This was Ferreira's shot. If he would have done well this window and capitalized on the opportunities he created for himself, I think you have a hard time unseating him. But because he became the next guy to waste opportunities, it's wide open. And so the winner in all of this really is Tim Weah. It's another point you can make as to why he should be in the starting 11 for the Wales game. We'll see if it happens. We'll see who starts scoring goals when the club season picks up again in August. But that will be the question with this team moving forward, because I don't think there are enough important games left. I'm basically just disregarding these Nations League games because the squad's going to be rotated and the opponents aren't good enough. So you're talking about potentially 2 games, assuming that these are high-quality World Cup opponents the U.S. faces in those final tune-ups. And I need to see more than 2 games from somebody at this point to convince me that is absolutely who should be starting at the number 9 position. The only guy who's convinced me they should be starting is Tim Weah.